Hold on a second. Welcome to another edition of Vikings Vintage, where we talk everything Vikings history. This week, we talk the 73 season.
Score Vikings, let's win this game. Score Vikings, on the winning name. Go get that first down, then get a touchdown. Rock 'em, sock 'em, fight, 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 fight. Go Vikings, run out the score. You'll hear us yell for more. V-I-K-I-N-G-S. Score Vikings, let's go.
Yeah, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button to all the channels that we're on this show. Last week we did the 69 season, unfortunately, the only season where the Vikings had a championship. We talked about every game that year except for the Super Bowl because we've already done a Super Bowl show.
And it's too painful to repeat.
Yes. And this week we're doing the 73 season. This is probably the one where Tony knows the most about. So I'm probably going to lean less on Wikipedia and Pro Football Reference, but we still use that for little points here and there. But there was a special. There was a reason why Tony wanted to do this because he wanted to talk about the lead in into that season. So Tony, I'll leave it up to you.
Okay, so we did 69. The Vikings go to the Super Bowl in 69. They go back to the Super Bowl in 73. The years in between, now they were still a good team, still one of the top teams in the NFL. And this was during the league merger. The league merged in 70. They were the top team in the NFC. They were defensively the best team in the NFL. You had the Purple People Leaders. You have Paul Krause in the secondary, Carl Kaselke. You had Lonnie Warwick, Roy Winston, Wally Hilgenberg at linebackers. Top defense. The Vikings' biggest problem was offense. And when I say offense, it was quarterback because Joe Kapp, who took them to the Super Bowl in 69, held out in 1970. So he wanted more money. He thought he was a free agent. He wanted to see what other teams had to offer. But back then, when you were a free agent, the only team you could negotiate was with your team, and then they would make a trade. They would trade you. It was really weird. So the Vikings go into 70, and their starting quarterback is Gary Quazzo, who was with the team in 69. They go 12-2, win the NFC Central. They make the playoffs. They're beat by the 49ers 17-14 in Minnesota. Temperature was probably maybe 5 degrees above. And John Brody came in here with the Niners. California team beat the Vikings. You move to 71. We had still Quazzo and Bob Lee, who was also our punter, playing quarterback, but they brought in Norm Snead. So you had 3 quarterbacks. And that old adage, if you have 3 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks, was true in 71. Defense carried that team in 71. Alan Page was the most valuable player in the NFL. The defense only allowed 139 points. They were number 1 in every defensive category, but lack of offense. They lost to the Cowboys in the playoffs on Christmas Day, 20-12. Okay, this team needs a quarterback. Fran Tarkenton wants out with the Giants. So the Vikings make the deal to bring Tarkenton back home, who, by the way, when Bud Grant was hired in 67, he wanted to keep Bud, but Bud wanted to keep Fran.
Coming for you, Tony.
Yeah. It's nice knowing everybody. But boy, they are. Okay, it ain't for me. But they go and get Fran. They bring Fran back to the Vikings. So he has a fit. Bud wanted him. Jerry Burns wanted him. So he bring him back and it's a Vikings jersey. Davey. It's Vikings. They bring Fran back in 72, but then injuries come into play. Alan Page is hurt. Carl Eller's hurt. Gary Larson's hurt. Clint Jones gets hurt. Gene Washington gets hurt on offense.
Well, get the feeling better, Orpheus.
Yep.
Pneumonia's
Get better,
no joke.
brother. And so the team, once again, you're expecting high hopes for the Vikings that year. They end up 7-7. They lose the division to the Packers. And right then, the noise starts. The Vikings are getting old. Fran will never be a winner. There was just that thing that maybe the Vikings had run their course after 72. So the start of the 73 season starts off on a good note with the draft. The Vikings drafted Chuck Foreman out of the University of Miami, number 1. Chuck could run the ball. He could also catch the ball. Excellent receiver, decent runner. And there was questions before he was drafted. Was he going to play running back or wide receiver? Well, the Vikings had him playing running back. So training camp rolls around. Carl Kasulki, on the way to training camp, got into a motorcycle accident, and he ended up paralyzed. I talked to Bob Lertzma about that, and Bob told me that was the only time he saw Bud Grant cry, when he had to announce in training camp in front of the whole team what happened to Carl Kasulki. And so we had that going in, but there was a attitude with this Viking team, because the year before, Miami went undefeated and won the Super Bowl. There was a feeling among this team, to a man, and this is how close this team was. Why couldn't we do it? Why can't we go 14-0? There was kind of this rallying cry. And also, and I believe Paul Krause talked about this, he had talked to Fran Tarkenton in the offseason. And Fran was used to being the quarterback to carry the team, to put the team on his shoulders. Paul Krause sat him down and told him, listen, you don't have to carry this team anymore. You've got us. Meaning you had the defense. All you had to do was put the points on the board, and the defense would make sure the lead stayed. And he said, let us put the pressure on us. We will get those victories. We will help you get those victories. All you got to do is drive the bus, make the plays, few errors, and we'll be okay. So they're going into training camp, but a lot of familiar faces are gone. Clint Jones is gone. Gene Washington is gone. Of course, Carl Kasulki is now, his career is over. John Henderson is gone. Lonnie Warwick and Bob Lee are both sent to the Atlanta Falcons. The Vikings get Bob Berry back. It was a different team, different attitude, but the nucleus was still there.
So real quick on the 73 draft, who was the last pick of that draft by the Vikings?
Oh, yeah, Dave Winfield. Dave Winfield, the Baseball Hall of Famer, who never played a down of football at the University of Minnesota.
Yeah, Dave Winfield. It's kind of funny because everybody knows my basketball team is Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And the Twins are my favorite baseball team, but the Padres are my National League team because Tony Gwynn's my favorite player of all time. So essentially, Dave Winfield was drafted by 3 of almost my favorite teams. He was drafted by the Vikings, he was drafted by the Hawks in the NBA, and he was drafted by the Padres in MLB. I always find that fascinating that one guy was drafted by 3 of my teams.
And he went to my old high school, St. Paul Central.
Yeah,
so he was a 3-sport guy. Davey, we drafted Ed Marinero in 72 along with Jeff Seaman. Beasley was with the team in 73. John Beasley, the tight end, but he did go to New Orleans. The ones that went to Atlanta were Bob Lee, and Lonnie Warwick. So, but yeah, he did go to New Orleans. I think Clint Jones went to San Diego along with Carl Gersbach. Carl Gersbach was another player that was gone. but they went into camp, and they went into camp on a just positive. And the first day of camp, Grady Alderman even said this. The offensive line had kind of been ripped on for a few years. They couldn't run block, which was true because, the year before, Oscar Reed was our leading rusher with over 600 yards. And then in the NFL, back in those days for football, you had to be able to run the ball. And they draft Chuck Foreman, and people were kind of amazed at how quick Foreman hit the holes in practice. And Grady Alderman looked at the report and said, you know what? You know them crappy blocks you said we used to make? They're going to look pretty good with this guy.
And that's the year the Vikings also got Gilliam too, right?
Gilliam got here in 72.
Oh, okay.
Gilliam got to the Vikings in 72. He was acquired in the I don't remember who it was for. Might have been Mike McGill. No, but he came from the Cardinals. He might have been part of Leo Hayden. But he came up here, and he was basically our Quazzo. Yeah, he got here for Quazzo. Thank you.
So the Vikings traded Quazzo to the Cardinals. In exchange, St. Louis gave the Vikings a second and a fourth-round selection and Gilliam. Man, the Vikings should have got arrested for grand larceny.
But that, you know what? That was Jim Finks.
Wow, that's God.
That was Jim Finks. And you know who was coaching the Cardinals at the time was the Vikings' former defense coordinator, Bob Holloway. So, no, we didn't have Bob Grimm, Bob. Bob Grimm was part of the Giants trade for Tarkington in 72.
So the quarterbacks for 73 were Tarkington and in Wells.
Mike Wells, yeah, he never played a game.
Brown, Foreman, Monero, Dave Osborne, and Oscar Reed were the running backs.
Ed Marinero, for those that don't know, became an actor. He was on Hill Street Blues. Yep. He was Officer Coffee.
Carol Darrell.
Carol Dale, the former Packer.
John Gilliam and Jim Lash were the receivers.
Right.
And then the tight ends were Stu Voigt and Doug
Kingsrider, former Gopher. Yeah. Do they have Gary Ballman on there?
That is all they have listed for tight ends, receivers, and for.
Is that Wikipedia?
Yeah, that's Wikipedia.
Okay, because they also had Gary Ballman was a tight end, and they also had Rhett Dawson as a wide receiver. It's a wonder we didn't get any major injuries. We did, but nothing major like we did in 72.
Yeah, Pro Football Reference doesn't really do rosters.
No, they don't. I don't think they really know.
It's really weird. It's really weird.
They don't really know them. So here's the thing. The Vikings start the season. In preseason, they go 5-0. They win all the preseason games. And then they're ready to start the regular season. Davey Chains, we got alerts in 71. He was waived by the Giants in 71, and we picked him up. He was on the roster in 71, but he was kind of like on the taxi squad, as they called it. And then he's played more in 72. But we open up the season in 73 after going undefeated in preseason, which I believe then was 6 games?
5 games. They went to 5 games that year.
5 games. They go undefeated. They beat Pittsburgh, Kansas City, the Chargers. Oh, they beat Miami.
And Oakland.
And Oakland. So they open up the season against the Oakland Raiders. First game of the year. And at one point, the Raiders had a 16-10 lead. Now, the starting quarterback for the Raiders was Darryl LaMonica. Hard-fought game, but the difference was Chuck Foreman. Foreman catches a pass in the flat, makes a couple of moves, gives the Vikings the lead, and Minnesota hung on to that game, and I believe they won 24-16.
Yeah, 24-16. Mm-hmm. Fred Cox with a field goal, and John Gilliam with a 43-yard touchdown, so that put him up 10
Yep.
nothing.
Right.
But then George Blanda, 16-yard field goal. George Blanda, 25-yard field goal. And then Gene Washington had a 63-yard punt return. So that made it. Sorry, Gene Atkinson. Sorry.
George Atkinson.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have a Gene here, probably a typo. Returned to punt 63 yards, make it 13-10.
Okay.
And then George Blanda with a 9-yard field goal. And then Chuck
Wait,
Foreman,
did you say 9 yards?
9-yard field goal.
Okay, so you know what that meant was
Well, the goalposts were at the beginning of the
goalposts were at the goal line, but it also
Yeah.
meant that the Vikings stopped them on 4th and goal. The Vikings stopped them on 3rd and goal. They couldn't punch it in from 1 yard out.
Yeah. And then Chuck Foreman with a 9-yard pass, and then Bill Brown with a 6-yard rush.
6-yard rush up the middle.
Yeah.
And they it was a close game, but the defense finally won it at the end.
Yeah, it was first downs, Raiders 19, Vikings 16.
Mm-hmm.
Raiders had 200 yards rushing, Vikings had 103. Sacks, Oakland got sacked 4 times, Vikings only got sacked twice.
Okay.
So it was pretty close. I mean, they had the Raiders had 4 fumbles and they lost 2 of them. So that's probably that.
Yeah, and I think if I remember right, one of them was Daryl LaMonica got sacked.
Yeah, LaMonica had 2 interceptions in that game.
Yeah.
And he also had and Tarkenton had 1 interception.
Yeah. Yeah, Bobby Bryant, I think, had one of those interceptions.
Bobby Bryant had an interception for 9 yards, and Jeff
Wright
had the other.
Okay. Jeff Wright took over for Carl Kosalki. So,
yeah.
So they're 1-0, home opener. And the next week they go to Chicago, and that is the breakout game for Chuck Foreman.
22-13 was the final.
Yep, 22-13 was the final. Chuck gained. He had over 100 yards. I think over 110, if I'm right. And I think he had a touchdown. Or no. The Vikings only had 1 touchdown that game, I believe. And that was a short pass to John Beasley for a touchdown. 113 yards, yes.
Let me see. Yeah, so Chuck Foreman had 116 yards, 16 rushes, 116 yards. His long was 41.
Okay.
He also had 4 receptions for 46 yards.
Hey, Davey, I think Beasley caught a TD pass in that game too. I think if Stu, I don't know how many touchdowns we scored, but I know Beasley did catch TD pass.
Beasley had 1 catch for 3 yards and a touchdown.
That's the one. Yep. Well, that was the only touchdown that day, wasn't it?
So it was a Bobby Douglas 1-yard rush for the Bears.
Okay.
Then they had Mike Percival had a field goal.
Mm-hmm.
Fred Cox field goal, Beasley touchdown, Fred Cox field goal, Fred Cox field goal, Fred Cox field goal, Percival field goal, Fred Cox field goal.
Okay.
So each team had 1 touchdown.
Right. And it was the Bears, and of course Bobby Douglas was their leading rusher. Well, he
couldn't throw.
He couldn't throw worth a damn, and then anytime he did throw, he was getting hit.
He had 10 rushes for 63 yards.
Yeah, he was a leading rusher.
Yep.
Yeah, he was a leading rusher. Viking defense that day was all over him, as they always were. They couldn't get it done. So right out of the gate, the Vikings are 2-0. The next week they got the Packers. Is that right?
Green Bay. Yep. Another looks like another awful game.
These scores, listening to these scores of these games, people are going to be like, where the hell was the offense? Well, they let the defense play back then.
Yeah, it was 11-3.
Yeah. It was a Chuck Foreman touchdown?
No, doesn't look like there was any touchdowns.
Oh, they were all field goals, and then they got a safety.
All field goals and a safety.
Field goals and a safety. Okay, that's right. I remember that game because it seemed like the Vikings, once the offense started moving, they couldn't keep it going. But Green Bay's offense that day, they started a quarterback by the name of Del Gaizo,
Let's see.
and he got replaced by not Jerry Taggy, but
Well, it looks
Scott
like
Hunter later.
yeah, Scott Hunter.
Del Gaizo started though.
Yeah, MacArthur Lane was tackled in the end zone for the safety.
That's right. Roy Winston got him. Roy Winston got the safety. But that was the Viking defense just shut him down offensively.
Foreman had 89 yards rushing.
Yep.
And Ed Marinero had 83.
Yeah, that was one of their best games as a duo. Marinero was pretty good. We drafted him in 72, but he had his moments where he looked pretty good. I remember my dad wasn't a big fan of his, but I mean, he had his moments. So we win 11-3. So then the next week is Detroit.
So after they're at Detroit,
okay,
and 23-9.
Yeah, 23-9. That game started out. Detroit fumbled the opening kickoff. Vikings recovered, and they were at like the 12-yard line. Fran just throws that little out pass to Marinero. Marinero scores
12 yards.
12 yards. And then the next drive, it was another turnover for the Lions. I don't know what it was. I don't remember if it was a fumble or interception or what. Once again, the Vikings had it deep in Lions territory, and it was the same play that they scored on. The same play. Same player. Mm-hmm. You would think that they would have covered it the first time. They would have been prepared for it. No, they weren't. And Chuck Foreman, I believe, rushed for 114 yards that game. Is that right?
Chuck Foreman. Let's see. I'm looking at it. Chuck Foreman, 16 rushes, 114 yards, 2 receptions, 24 yards.
Okay. So once again, we can run the ball.
Under 200 yards passing again.
Yep. But once again, the defense, once the defense, and this was where you knew the Viking defense was kind of getting back to its old self. Once they got a lead, they didn't let go of it.
Yeah, it was 14 rip. And then the Lions got a field goal.
Right.
And then the Lions got back. The Lions got back-to-back field goals, but then the Vikings got 2 more field goals. Mm-hmm. So it was 14-6-3 for the Vikings. It was only 3-3-3 for the Lions.
And the Lions did drive. They did have drives where they got deep into Viking territory. But I believe one of the drives was an interception by Paul Krause. He ended in the end zone.
Yeah, they had Landry had 3 picks in that game.
Okay. Yeah, Greg Landry. And Greg Landry was a good quarterback. He just didn't play well against the Vikings.
Nate Wright, Krause, and Simeon had the 3 picks.
Okay. Jeff Seaman had an interception too?
Yep.
Wow, okay. And so
Dick Duran had 3 returns for 68 yards. That was pretty much the Lions offense.
That was all the Lions offense.
Yes, that Dick Duran for the young folks in here.
Yep, same Dick Duran. So we're what? 4-0?
Right now they are the 4-0 going against the Lions after the Lions game.
Okay, so who do they play next?
At San Fran.
Okay. That's the game and then San Francisco, like 2 years in a row, had been just a thorn, or 3 years in a row, had been a thorn in our side. They beat us in a playoff game. They beat us in 71, and then John Brody came off the bench, beat us in 72 last game of the year, which put the Niners in the playoffs. So I believe Brody retired. So Steve Spurrier was the full-time quarterback. Spurrier completes like what?
31 of 48 for 320 yards, which the 70s is like throwing for like 600 yards.
That's like throwing for 600 yards. And they still lose.
Well, he only had 1 touchdown. He had 2 picks.
Yeah. Paul Krause, I think, had both of the picks. Once again, I think the main offensive weapon for the Vikings was...
Yep, Paul Krause had both.
Yep, was Chuck Foreman. So also that game was, if for those of us old enough to remember, the Niners played on artificial turf.
So it was 22 rushes for 71 yards. But John Gilliam, John had 7 receptions for 107 yards.
Right. Did he get in the end zone?
Yes, he did.
Okay. I thought he
And
got
then Gene Washington had 8 catches for 118 yards.
Okay. Now that was no, Davey, they played at Candlestick then. They were at Candlestick Park then. There were 2 Gene Washington.
Candlestick opened up 72, I think it was.
Yeah, because I believe they played in Kezar until 71, and then 72 they moved to, I could be wrong, they moved to Candlestick. But there were 2 Gene Washingtons in the NFL at the time. We had one, and then the Niners had one, which was weird.
Candlestick Park.
Yep. And
which one became the players? The one who played for the 49ers was the one who became the NFLPA representative, right?
Yeah, the 49er one. Yeah, our Gene Washington, I believe, still lives here in the Twin Cities. I'm not sure. Or he might have moved back to Michigan. But he lived here for years. So we are what? 6-0.
Yeah, we're 5-0.
We're 5-0. So that whole 14-0 thing's looking pretty good right about now. So we win 17-13 in San Francisco.
Yep.
Thanks, Davey. Okay, he's still in Minneapolis. Okay. Then
so they had 3 home games after this. Actually, they had 4 home games in a row.
Okay.
After the San Fran game.
Okay.
First one was against the Eagles.
And Roman Gabriel. And the Eagles were surprisingly tough. Eagles at this time had both Harold Carmichael, and they also had Charlie Young, who was a hell of a tight end.
And they came into the game 1-3.
Yeah, but
1-3-1. Yeah.
But Gabriel was just Gabriel always been a thorn in the Vikings defense for years. They beat him, but he was always a thorn in their side. And the Eagles came in here and played the Vikings tough, but the difference in the game was John Gilliam.
Yeah, Gabriel had 23 of 32 for 291 yards. No touchdowns, no picks.
Right.
But the Vikings did give up rushing touchdowns. They gave up 3 of them. They gave up
one was an end around to Charlie Young.
Right. They gave up one to Young, to James. And
Bo James, I believe his name was.
Yeah, was it Bogajenga? Norm? Lou Bongagara? Bognis? Lee Bongnis?
How do you spell it?
It's let me see here. Let me go back. Click on the wrong one. It is Lee Bougess. Bouggesss. What's the other one who got a touchdown? He only played in 32 career games.
Bogus.
Yeah, he only played in 32 career games.
Yeah,
but he had 3. He only had 3 carries for 2 yards, but he had a touchdown.
Right, but that game was. Yeah, you're right, Davey. That game was 28-21. The difference was, I believe, John Gilliam scored 2 touchdowns. One was on an end around, was on a wide receiver reverse, which he had clear sailing to the end zone because it was nowhere. There were no Eagles near him, and I believe the other one was a couple of. I think he had a TD pass too.
He had a rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown. He had 6 yards, 116 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Receiving 1 rush, 44 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Oscar Reed, Chuck Foreman had the other touchdowns.
Okay. Oscar Reed was a starter. He was a starter.
He's like the most unknown Vikings player from the 70s.
Well, he was, whenever he came in, he just was money. They called him, his nickname was a seed because they knew that you give him the ball, he's going to make some positive yards. And he led us in rushing in 72. But he was split time with, he was older. So he split time with Marinero, who they drafted in 72 with Foreman. But then Marinero would get hurt, or Marinero's play would be inconsistent. And so, exactly, Davey, give the seed to Reed. And Then Chuck was also injury prone, was having injuries that year. He had nagging injuries. So, Oscar Reed could play both fullback and halfback. By the way, Chuck Foreman, he was listed as a running back, which he was, but he even says it himself. Chuck Foreman was a fullback. He was a fullback. If you were going to give him a technical halfback or fullback, he was a fullback. But he could play halfback, wingback, and tailback, and but he was technically a fullback. So after this game is the Rams game.
Yes, that's another.
That game
was
That game was probably the game of the year. Both teams undefeated. Both defenses kind of at the top of the game. I think the Rams were number one in defense coming into the game. The Vikings were playing good ball. They were doing enough to win, and the defense was back to its old self. Only one touchdown was scored in this game, and that was a short pass from Tarkington to Chuck Foreman.
9 yards.
And how many yards was it?
9.
9 yards. And correct me if I'm wrong, the Vikings had to lead the whole game?
Yes.
Okay.
They scored 10 points in the first half.
Right.
And that was it.
And that was it. The rest was up to the Viking defense. And I'm just going to be blunt. They played their asses off this game. That defense played probably the best game they had played in years.
They gave up 87 yards passing to John Hadle.
Yeah.
He had 2 interceptions and he was sacked twice.
Yeah.
He had negative 3 yards rushing. Larry Smith at 63 yards rushing, and the John Burleson
Jim Burleson.
Burleson only had 41 yards receiving.
Yeah. Yeah. They just, and the Viking offense didn't look good itself. They did enough just to win.
Yeah, it was 100. They gave up 137 yards total.
Yep. Yeah, that was just that game was probably, Vikings hadn't played a game like that in years.
And Nate Wright and Jeff Wright.
They both had the interceptions.
Yep.
Yep. And I believe Carl Eller had the game clinching sack at the end.
Of course, this is the 70s, so they didn't keep track of that back then. So
right, but I do remember that last drive. Eller, I remember that just because my dad was just so excited. Eller got the sack, and that was probably the game of the year in the NFL. I could be wrong, but if it wasn't, it should have been. It was that good of a game.
You can find it on YouTube too. There's a great some of these people who on YouTube. They take an old film from the 70s, they clean it up, they put it in high definition, and then they put it on YouTube. I don't know the commitment they make because they probably don't make a lot of money doing it, but you can find all these. You can find these games.
You can find a lot of games what they'll do, and what you really should look for, like I've done it a lot. Years ago, you remember this catch, we used to have the NFL This Week.
Yeah.
Or the NFL highlights would be like an hour show or a half-hour show where they show the highlights of every week.
And growing up for me, seeing how my favorite team was Minnesota, and I didn't get to watch a lot of Minnesota games.
Mm-hmm.
Inside the NFL with Nick Buoniconti, and that to me that was must watch.
That was when I got HBO. And we got HBO like in June or July. I couldn't wait for the fall because then I would see inside the NFL.
Yeah,
I would see the highlights of all the teams.
It was Nick Buoniconti,
and Len Dawson.
And then they brought somebody else in.
They brought somebody in, but for years it was Buoniconti and Dawson.
Yeah,
and but even before then, like on Saturdays, they would have like an NFL game of the week. And they would show that they have those highlights on YouTube. If you're looking for old team highlights, they have those on YouTube also. That's where, because I'll watch those every now and then. a lot of people now are finding the telecast of old games and they're cleaning them up. They,
Yeah.
from what I understood, like the local networks, so somebody would record the games, but then they would erase them. That's what they did to Super Bowl I. They went to go look for the tape for Super Bowl I, and they found it, and it was CBS, and they had erased Super Bowl I with an Ed Sullivan show.
Yeah. And there, you can actually find you can actually find to where so they don't get trademarked. They actually take the TV broadcasters and the TV logo
Mm-hmm.
off of the broadcast, and they'll put the radio guys on.
Oh, I had
Yeah.
that for I listened to the Miami broadcast of the 72 Dolphin Vikings game. But there was the Miami broadcast, and they would lace in highlights. But it was the whole radio broadcast, and I grew up, of course, with the Viking broadcast. So, but yeah, that's if you really want, if anybody that's out there that really wants to see old vintage highlights, go to YouTube. Davey Chains, you're right. Dave Volsky's YouTube channel. He's got a ton of games, a ton of old NFL games.
Yeah, there's somebody who I follow on YouTube who also does the same thing for old YouTube stuff, old
Right.
Viking stuff. And he does, but he doesn't just do old. He doesn't just do like stuff from the 70s. Like he'll do 90s stuff.
He does all the way up to like the 2000s.
I think
If
it
if
might
I
be the
think
same
who
channel.
you're thinking of, yeah.
But so that means after the Rams game, so basically the Rams and the Vikings were fighting for some during the 70s. The Vikings and the Rams were the two teams that always seemed to be the best two teams in the NFC in the NFL.
Vikings, Rams, Cowboys.
Right.
You had your three constants in all divisions. In the NFC, it was the Cowboys, the Vikings, the Rams.
The guy who I watch on YouTube, his name is Funky Drunken.
Funky Dunkelman?
Yes.
Okay.
He like his last video he did was 86, the Vikings versus the 49ers, week 6, 1986.
Oh yeah, I remember that game.
And the week before that was the Bills Vikings 2010 game. So he goes back and forth with that. So like I said, YouTube is a great resource for all that type of stuff.
It really is.
Yeah.
I'm really kind of shocked that these NFL teams themselves don't have these old highlights.
If you go to the Minnesota Vikings YouTube channel, it doesn't have
doesn't have it.
They have like 30-second clips. Like they have like the Minnesota Miracle catch, but they don't have like the whole game and stuff like that. So,
No, they don't even have if they have the highlight reels, they don't put them out there. It's all just focused on the now, which unfortunately they're not really telling you the history of the team. Unfortunately. They got the museum, and even there it's kind of more current. I mean, as far back as they've got the old guys, but people, if you're going to be a Viking fan, you need to know the past. That's all. If you're going to be a fan of anything, you just need to know your past.
So,
but yeah, it's just you. So yeah, and I'm amazed I still remember all these games too. Let me be honest with you. Still.
So right now the Vikings are 6 after playing the Rams. They are 6-0.
Are they 6-0 or 7-0?
Let me see. Let me go back. Hold on a second. I clicked out of it. I think they're. So the Rams were 6-1. The Vikings are 7-0 after that game.
Okay, yeah, because both teams were undefeated.
Right.
Both teams were undefeated. After that is who? Cleveland?
Cleveland. And for some reason, the Vikings own Cleveland.
Well, I don't even remember who was playing. I don't.
So it was 26-3. The Browns were 4-2 coming into the game. They were 4-2-1. It was 26-3 Vikings, and so the quarterback for the Browns was Mike Phipps, and then Tarkenton and for the Vikings obviously, and then Horn looks like he got in. So I don't know.
John Horn, the former Packer quarterback.
Yeah.
Phipps got picked off by Wally Hilgenberg and Jeff Seaman, and they just hounded him all day.
Yeah.
But that was a complete Viking game. They own that game from start to finish.
Yeah, and Leroy Kelly had 4 carries for 19 yards in that game.
Yeah, and they really, I mean, when you started winning like that, and with a veteran team like the Vikings, all of a sudden you're gaining confidence. Fran Tarkenton looked like a world beater. Fran Tarkenton was playing his ass off.
The Vikings had 26 unanswered. So the Browns scored a field goal first. So the Browns scored first. They were up 3-0. And then it was Fred Cox, Oscar Reed with a 3-yard rush, Steve Voigt 7-yard pass, and then Fred Cox with another field goal.
Yeah. So I mean, it was, Davey, Browns had only 4 first downs.
4 first downs. They had 70 yards rushing and 90 yards passing. They had 145 total yards.
Yep. Yeah, that was all Vikings. All Vikings.
They also had 7 penalties.
Right then, they're now 8-0. That team, the Vikings are 8-0, and right now the best team in the NFC.
Yeah.
And then the next week is Detroit.
Detroit again after.
Okay. This game is interesting. Chuck Foreman didn't play, and then Oscar Reed didn't play either, I don't believe. The starting backfield was Dave Osborne, Bill Brown, and Fran Tarkenton. That was the starting backfield when Fran left in 1966. They were the starting backfield for this game. Osborne gained 89 yards. Bill Brown gained 102 yards. Detroit scored first.
It was Bill Brown. Well, you're off by a yard. It was 102 for Brown. Osborne was 79. So you're close. And then also Ed Marinero had 52 yards. So
he had a touchdown too.
Yeah. And then Gilliam had over 100 yards receiving. Right. And he had 5 receptions for 129 yards.
But here, the start of the game was Bob Lertzema. Lertzema had 3 sacks that game.
So Munson, the quarterback for the Lions, got sacked 4 times.
Yeah. Lertzema had 3 of them. Marshall had the other.
Yeah. There was another dominated game by the defense. They only gave up they gave up a little bit more total yards because it looked like they gave up 182 yards passing, but
Detroit scored on early. Detroit had the lead.
Detroit scored first. Ron Jesse had a 33-yard pass.
That is also the game where you'll see it. It's in every Viking highlight reel. Herman Weaver goes back to punt, and he doesn't punt the ball. He decides to run with it. Then he tries to kick it. He gets nailed, and that's where Wally Hilgenberg picks it up and scores a touchdown.
Yeah, Wally Hilgenberg, 2-yard special team fumble return.
Yep. And that set the ball. See, we used to play Detroit all the time, and Detroit, as we say, would do Detroit things. That was one of the Detroit things. They just would do weird crap that would cause them to lose.
Hey, until they prove the Lions prove that they can consistently win. I'm not picking them to win the division that's coming up this year.
No, they're too inconsistent. That's
so Lions history has shown that. So So the Vikings at this point, they're 9-0. The Lions are 3-5-1. There was at Metropolitan Stadium. This was the last game of the four.
How what? I got to look into that. How did the Vikings get 4 straight home games? Usually they only get 3. They got 4.
Right. They got 4, and they got 4 home. Let's see how many. Let me see.
4 in a row. That was the weird
right. Part. So Philadelphia, the Rams, Cleveland, Detroit, and then they played they had a 1 road game, then they played at home again, then they finished the season with 3
on the road, 2 games.
3 straight on the road.
3 straight on the road.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, 1973 was also the first year that the NFL implemented the blackout rule for home games. because I can tell you right now, when I was watching the 71 and 72, I didn't see a Viking home game, and they would be sold out. They just would never show them. And then when the 73 rolled around, they had the blackout rule, and I actually got to see every Viking home game, which was weird. 7-year-old kid, I get to see the Vikings in purple for once on their home field.
Was it a black and white TV or was it color?
Oh, what do we have then? Okay, the TV in the kitchen was black and white. The TV in the living room was a Curtis Mathis, black and white. It was black and white. Yeah, we got color in 75. We got a color TV in 75. And I was just like, oh my God, the Vikings those are actually purple jerseys. They look kind of blue, but yeah, it was black and white. But yeah, that was the first year that the home games were the blackout rule, and you got to see home games. So that kind of helped too. That's probably why I remember him most too.
So the next game is at Atlanta.
Oh, Monday night. Bob Lee is a starting quarterback for the Falcons. I don't know what it was, but there's a highlight where Bob Lee gets away from the Viking rush. Matter of fact, Eller and Marshall literally caved in on him on the edges, and he got out of it. Avoided a sack. He avoided Alan Page, and he runs. Gary Larson doesn't get there in time. He throws a TD pass. That was kind of like the highlight of the game. Falcons won it 20-14. Gilliam scored for the Vikings, and Bill Brown scored for the Vikings.
It was Mike Mayer.
Nick Mickemeyer.
Yeah, he field goal for the Falcons. And then John Gilliam, 39 reception.
Mm-hmm.
Dave Hampton, 19-yard rush for the Falcons.
Okay.
Eddie Ray, 39-yard touchdown pass.
That's the touchdown pass.
And that was from Bob Lee. And then Nick Mickemeyer, again, with a 49 field goal. Then Bill Brown with a 2-yard reception from Fran Tarkenton.
Yep. Yeah, and that ended the win streak at 9.
Yeah, so it was pretty close. I mean, the total yards were 291 to 347.
How many turnovers did the Vikings have?
Vikings had 3 turnovers. Actually, they had I think they had 5. They had 2 interceptions and 3 fumbles.
Okay.
And the Falcons had 4, 2 and 2.
Yeah. Now remember, folks, this is the 1970s, so turnovers were plenty. I mean, you didn't have ball control like you did now.
Yeah.
It was a completely different game.
Gilliam had 97 receiving yards. No one broke 100 for Minnesota. They only had the leading rusher was Chuck Foreman. He had 38 yards rushing.
Yeah, and Atlanta had a pretty good defense. Atlanta did have a pretty good defense.
And Dan Hampton had 100 yards rushing.
Right on the nose?
108.
How many carries?
23.
That's what, a 3-yard average?
Along the 25. He also had 55 yards receiving.
Okay.
So he won the game for Atlanta on the offensive side of the ball. He had their touchdown. He had one of their 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
That touchdown by Eddie Ray was his only catch.
I think that's the same Hampton that played with the Packers, and he was kind of a thorn in the Vikings side then.
Paul Krause had the pick for Minnesota. Ray Brown had it for Atlanta.
Okay. So we're 9-1. We come back home to play the Bears.
Well, I could see why Paul Krause is the all-time interception leader. When you look at these game stats, interception of Paul Krause.
Well, yeah, that's all he had to do was play center field. Yeah, Paul Krause will even tell you that. All he had to do was literally, because of the front 7 we had, all he had to do was play center field. So he could just read the quarterback.
And yeah, makes sense. So it looks like the Vikings took their anger out on the Bears next week. 31-13.
Okay, that game was Carl Kasulki Day. Carl made his first appearance.
Last home game of the season, by the way.
Yeah. So Carl makes his appearance. He gets a game ball at the end, after the game. They beat up on Bobby Douglas. I mean, they literally beat up on Bobby Douglas. Bobby Douglas went through 2 jerseys in that game.
Bobby, he was sacked 8 times.
Yeah, it was bad for Bobby. Fran had a couple of passes to
yes, Mom, he does all this mostly.
Yeah.
Awesome memory. Yep.
I'm lucky. I still got my memory. He had a couple of passes, John Gilliam, and I think Fran ran for a touchdown also. I think Bob Berry played too. Did Bob Berry play in this game?
Yes. Tarkington was 11-15 for 181 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks. He got sacked twice, but he had 1 rushing attempt for 8 yards and a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck Foreman had 11 yards, 39 yards, but he had a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
Oscar Reed was the leading rusher, 97 yards.
Oh, imagine that.
John Gilliam had over 100 yards again. He had 5 for 139 for 2 touchdowns.
And I think Bob Berry threw one of those touchdowns.
Bob Berry was 2 for 3 for 50 yards, 1 touchdown.
Yep. Okay. So we wrapped up the division against the Lions.
But it wasn't just Bobby Douglas. Bobby Douglas got sacked 4 times. Gary Huff also got sacked 4 times.
Oh, that's right. They had Gary Huff. I forgot all about Gary Huff. He was no better than Douglas.
He had a passer rating of 138. That's because he only threw 8 passes, 6 of 8. He had a touchdown though. Did he get sacked 4 times too? They both got sacked 4 times. Yes.
Okay, that ain't saying he got hit a lot.
It doesn't have hits. They didn't keep track of that back then.
No, he got. I remember that game. It was pretty bad. That was one of the better games by the front 4. But the Vikings didn't blitz back then.
Yeah, Joe Moore was the leading receiver for the Bears, 75 yards. Leading receiver, Joe Moore.
That's why I said who. I've never heard of the guy.
And then the leading receiver was Earl Thomas, 3 for 43.
I've heard of Earl Thomas. Yeah. And I think Earl Thomas played with the Jets at one time.
So the Vikings, Oscar Reed, 12 for 97. Chuck Foreman, 11 for 39. Brent McClanahan, 3 for 24. Dave Osborne, 8 for 19, and 6 of 16 for Ed Marinaro.
Okay.
Stu Voigt had 1 catch. King Ryder had 4. King Ryder had 1 catch, and Carol Drake had 1 catch. So
okay. So then is it the next week we go to Cincinnati and get shut out?
Let me see. So it was
27-0.
Yeah, 27-0. That game had to be ugly.
It was. Marinaro fumbles. I forget who picked. Was it okay? Look at the scoring. Was it Lamar Parrish that returned a fumble for a touchdown?
It was Lamar Parrish, 23-yard defensive fumble return.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And then I forget who ran 55 yards for a touchdown. What was his name?
There was 30. Well, there was for touchdowns. Essex Johnson ran 40.
Essex Johnson.
It was 40 yards.
40 yards. Yeah. Essex Johnson. We had
81 yards rushing, 127 yards passing for a total yards of 201.
Yeah, that was a bad game. So they get shut out, and then they take it out on the Packers the next week.
Hey, anytime we can take it out on the Packers. 31-7 against the Packers.
They beat the Packers 31-7. Bobby Bryant had an interception return for a touchdown, I believe. Chuck Foreman had a 50-yard touchdown run.
Stu Voigt caught a touchdown pass for 21 yards. Bobby Bryant, 46-yard interception return. Chuck Foreman, 50-yard touchdown run.
Yep.
John Gilliam, 20-yard touchdown pass. Fred Cox, 25-yard field goal. And then the Packers scored at the end of the game to avoid the shutout. 17-yard pass.
Who was the quarterback?
Jerry Tate?
Jerry Taggy.
But John Del Gazzo threw the touchdown.
Oh, Del Gazzo?
Yeah, threw the touchdown. Tapey had 3 interceptions. There was 4 picks in the game. Bryant had 3 of them.
That's what I figured. Okay. Who had the other one?
Jeff Wright.
Jeff Wright? Okay.
Yeah.
How many times was it Packers sacked, does it say?
The one time.
That's it?
Yep, one for it was 11-yard sack.
I think that was Page.
Tappy was sacked once for 11 yards.
Yeah, I think that was Page.
Well, he only threw the ball 25 times.
How many yards did Brockington have that game?
Brockington had 124.
He did all that run and never got in the end zone.
Nope. His long was 29, 27 carries for 125 yards. That's like 2 yards a carry.
That's like 2 yards a carry.
Yeah.
God.
They were committed.
Yeah, they were. I mean, that's a healthy commitment. Yeah, God.
That's Mike Zimmer right there. You
yep. Yeah. If you, I mean, that was 70s football. It really was. In a nutshell. So then we play. Now there's a kicker. We ended the season against the Giants, and they're playing in Connecticut.
31-7 again.
The Giants are playing in New Haven. They don't have a home. This is before they built Giant Stadium, and they couldn't play Yankee Stadium anymore.
They played the game at
Yale Bowl, and that game ended up being a snowstorm.
The Giants were awful.
Yeah, they were bad.
2-11-1.
Yeah, they were bad. Terry Brown, backup defensive back, had an interception return. Oscar Reed scored.
Norm Steed was the quarterback.
Norm Snead was part of the Tarkenton trade. Yeah, I believe Bob Grimm played for him too. Was Bob Grimm
Bob Grimm had 2 catches for 54 yards.
Okay.
So the scoring was Oscar Reed 9-yard rush, Fred Cox field goal, Terry Brown 63-yard interception return, Bill Brown 1-yard rush, Ron Johnson for the Giants scored their only touchdown. He had a 16-yard touchdown reception. Ed Marinero had a 1-yard rush.
Okay.
Yeah, it was 313 yards. Our offense played pretty well. The Giants' offense played pretty well, but their defense.
Yeah, but they only put up 7 points.
Yeah.
Well, they put up a ton of, which back then was a lot of yards, which was pretty decent for back then. But bottom line, if you didn't score any points, it wasn't a good game.
The Vikings didn't do anything offensively, rushing, passing the ball. Tarkenton only had 130 yards.
It was the last game of the year. They weren't trying to.
Yeah, I mean, Gilliam had 1 for 17, 2 for 22 for Voigt, 2 for 22 for Ballman, 1 for 18 for Jim Lash, and Carol Drake had 1 for 18. That was pretty much it.
Did Bob Berry play quarterback?
Yeah, no. Fran Tarkenton played the whole game.
Fran played the whole game?
He only threw the ball 14 times.
Oh, okay.
10 of 14 for 130. Then he had 1 rush for 11 yards. Osborne was the leading rusher, 9 for 72.
Okay.
So yeah, it looks like the Vikings were just like, okay, we're just gonna,
So they don't get 14-0, but they finished 12-2.
Yeah.
And they open up the playoffs against defending Redskins.
You could say the 2 losses were pretty bad though.
Well, the Cincinnati loss was real bad. The Atlanta loss, I think, was a shocker. It was an upset. Atlanta always played us tough, though. That was, and they were coached by
old, nasty Riverfront Stadium.
Yeah, and the coach of the Falcons at that time was Norm Van Brocklin, I believe. I believe it was Van Brocklin.
Let me see. Let me go back to that game. The Falcons, right?
Yeah.
Norm Van Brocklin.
Yeah, it was Van Brocklin. That's what I thought. Yep. So anytime Van Brocklin could stick it to Tarkenton, he was happy.
So the divisional playoff game was against the Redskins.
Mm-hmm.
So it said Minnesota scored 17 points in the fourth quarter to overcome a 13-10 deficit, including 2 touchdowns in a span of 1 minute 5 seconds.
Mhm.
Both offenses struggled in the first quarter. The Vikings were completely unable to move the ball, finishing the quarter without any first downs, while Washington's kicker Kurt Knight missed 2 field goal attempts. One missed from 49, the other from 17. How in the hell do you Blair Walsh it from 17 anyway?
Okay,
Spoiler,
that is the game. Matter of fact, it's on YouTube. I've watched it a few times.
yeah, game weather was 19 degrees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Matter of fact, right out the gate, like in the first series, Fran has John Gilliam wide open, and he overshoots him. This is in the first quarter. I think it's on the first drive, and as I said, the Vikings came out tight, and that's the game at halftime where Carl Eller was screaming at John Gilliam to shake it off. That's the game where Carl Eller broke the blackboard in the locker room.
It was 7-3 at halftime.
Yep. I asked I asked Ed White, I asked him, did he remember it? He's like, I'll never forget it. It scared the crap out of me. Because it's Eller. And and Carl was like the toughest one. And for him to do something like that got everybody's attention.
Yeah, that missed field goal was the Redskins drove the whole field. They drove from their own 14 to inside the Vikings 10-yard line.
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota finally to get rolling in the second quarter with a 50-yard completion from Tarkington to running back Oscar Reed, setting up Fred's Cox 19-yard field goal. But with 3:30 left in the half, Vikings defensive back Bobby Bryant fumbled a punt return that was recovered by Redskin running back Bob Burnett on the Minnesota 21-yard line. Billy Kramer then completed a 17-yard pass to Charlie Taylor before Larry Brown scored on a 3-yard touchdown run to give the Redskins a 7-3 lead. Minnesota responded with a drive into the field goal range, but Mike Bass intercepted a pass from Tarkington to maintain Washington's lead going into halftime. Mike Bass, he was the same guy that scored the return for touchdown in the Super Bowl the year prior, right?
That's the Mike Bass. Yep, that's him. Okay.
Then said the Vikings took the opening kickoff in the second half and marched 79 yards, including a 46-yard run by Reed to score a fullback Bill Brown's 2-yard rushing touchdown. To make matters worse for Washington, star cornerback Paul Fischer suffered cracked ribs on the drive and was replaced by Speedy Duncan, an 11-year veteran.
Pat Fischer is the one that got hurt?
It says, Fischer.
Pat Fischer, yeah, that was their most dependable cornerback.
Yeah. He was replaced by Speedy Duncan, 11-year vet who normally only played as a kick returner.
He was just a kick returner, yeah.
Still, the Redskins managed to take back the lead with Knight's 2 3-yard field goals. First time in a playoff record of 52 yards, and then the second from 46 yards. Now facing a 13-10 fourth quarter deficit, the Vikings stormed back with 2 quick touchdowns. First, they drove 71 yards in 8 plays to score on a Tarkington pass to John Gilliam, who beat single coverage by Duncan for a 29-yard touchdown catch. Then on the first play of Washington's ensuing drive, Nate Wright intercepted a pass from Kilmer, returned it 26 yards to the Redskin 8-yard line, setting up a 6-yard touchdown pass from Tarkington to Gilliam that made the score 24-13. With 5:28 left, Washington got back to within 4 points, getting good field position due to Ken Stone blocking the Vikings punt and covering it no punctuation here. Okay, Vikings punt and covering it into the 26-yard. So there's no comma, there's no nothing. Just go straight into Kilmer's 28-yard touchdown pass to Roy Jefferson. But the Vikings managed to burn up 4 minutes with their ensuing drive, finishing it off with a 30-yard Cox field goal, gave them a 27-20 lead. The Redskins had less than 2 minutes to drive for the tying touchdown and ended up turning the ball over on downs. Tarkington was 16 of 28 for 222 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Reed had 17 carries for 95 yards and caught 4 passes for 76. Brown rushed for 115 yards and a touchdown while also catching 2 passes for 13 yards.
Oscar Reed was a star of that game.
Sometimes they're not concentrating on me, said Oscar Reed in a
Mm-hmm.
reference to his big plays in the game. Since early in the season, they've been keying on Chuck Foreman. I'm not the world's greatest pass catcher or runner, but given a little room, I can make use of what I got.
Yeah. Yep.
That's a great quote.
He was good. He was a good running back. He was dependable.
Which is true. I would imagine Chuck Foreman was every week the coach's film. We got to stop 44. We got to stop 44. We got to stop 44.
And
I
Foreman,
imagine that was. I imagine that was the mentality of coaching.
And in that era, Foreman, his biggest asset was able to come out of the backfield and catch passes. And 9 times out of 10, you had a linebacker on him. Well, guess what? Those linebackers couldn't keep up with Foreman. I mean, Foreman wasn't the fastest, but he could put moves on him, and he had sure hands. He very seldom, But he used to return punts all the time.
He was like David Palmer never. He was like David Palmer never called for a fair catch.
Yeah, I don't know why he was. I don't remember why he was returning punts then. Well, it was the playoffs. That's why. It was the playoffs. So yeah, he was returning punts. So we beat
the Redskins.
The Redskins, and then we have to go to Dallas to face the Cowboys. Now, here's the deal with the Cowboys.
Why would we have to go? Why would we have to go to Dallas? They didn't have a better record, did they?
What were the Cowboys? 11-3, 12-2?
Let me see. Let me go to Dallas.
I think then it went by. I think
Dallas was 10-4. No, let me see. Yeah, they went 10-4.
I think it went by alternated sites. That's the only thing I can think of. Because here's a weird thing. I think 70, 71, 70 was played in San Francisco. 71, it might have been played in San Francisco too. 72, it was played in Washington. Was it better conference record? Because of the Cowboys were 10-4. Who did they lose to?
Okay, so
because the only team the Vikings lost to in the conference was Atlanta. Now we're both going to look it up.
It says the strangest controversy in the NFC Championship game was
okay.
It's a video though, so let me go to news. I don't want to. Let me see. It's not really showing.
Cowboys started. Matter of fact, the Cowboys were 4-3.
Yeah,
at one time.
Let's see.
Yeah, because they lost back to back to the Redskins and the Rams.
They weren't even the winner of the division.
Well, they were the
East. Let's see. Let me see.
They were
the East. They were the East champions, but
yeah.
But why does it? They beat Los Angeles in the divisional round,
right?
But it doesn't say why the conference was played. You see you go down. See, I'm curious now why they would have to play in Dallas.
I don't understand that either.
Yeah, it doesn't say. I'm sure there's somewhere.
You got the Vikings schedule there? How many points did the Vikings score?
Let me see. I'm trying to see if I can see if they have that listed here. Let's see. Journalist stats. It doesn't. See, it doesn't have points. At least let's see. Let me see. Um, did they keep that track back then? Let me see.
Yeah, they did.
Okay.
They kept track of points.
So,
They've kept track of points since the beginning of time.
so the Cowboys were 27 points, 27.3 points per game. And the Vikings are not even on here. Yeah, let me see.
Because
The Rams scored the most. They were 27.7 points per game. So the Vikings held them to 9 in that game. The Vikings averaged 21.1.
how many points did the Vikings have together?
252. The Cowboys were
The Cowboys had 362.
Yeah, but that shouldn't be what determines home field.
Well, even back then, the Cowboys were kind of screwing everything to get it to their favor. That was kind of the start of it, because going into that game, the Cowboys for sure thought they were going back to the Super Bowl. One, because Tarkenton it was a big game. Tarkenton had never won a big game, and it was played in Dallas. And they thought for sure they were going to win, and the Vikings went in there and beat their asses. They did.
Yeah, it was 27-10.
27-10. Tarkenton played his best game as a Viking. They went in there and they were underdogs. Vikings were underdogs. How many? I don't know how many points underdogs they were, but they were heavy underdogs. And for the Cowboys, I believe Calvin Hill did not play, their leading rusher.
Here.
For those that don't know, Calvin Hill is the father of Grant Hill, the NBA player. So, yeah, Bob Lilly didn't play either on the defensive line. He was out that game. So,
Was that? I'm trying to figure out. One of these websites has got the spread of who was favored. I thought it was Pro Football Reference, but I guess it's the Vikings actually were -1.
That depends on who you ask. A lot of people were putting money down on
it. Said Vegas line Vikings -1.
Yeah, but a lot of people were putting money down on the Cowboys. Yeah, that's right. He dislocated his elbow. Yeah, Davey, why didn't Lilly play? Do you know that answer? Because I remember, it just hit me that he didn't play either. They were missing 2 key players.
It says with the loss of running back Calvin Hill, defensive tackle Bob Lilly to injuries. The offense couldn't get anything going. Also, it doesn't say.
That game is on YouTube, by the way, people. If anybody wants to see it, it is on YouTube.
Injured his hamstring in the victory against the Broncos in December 2nd.
Oh, Lilly did?
Yeah.
Hamstring injury? Okay.
Yeah. And then he came back for the Rams game, and then he re-injured it.
Oh, okay. Well, see, and that's how they weren't that. I mean, if they were really concerned about the Vikings, Lilly would have played. He would have. They weren't concerned with the Vikings. They weren't concerned. They weren't concerned with Tarkenton, put it that way. And plus, I mean, the Cowboys had beat us in 71.
Sounds like today they're not worried about Cousins.
No, they're not worried about Cousins.
Good luck, Atlanta.
dude. Don't do
Yeah,
that.
great regular season, but when playoff time comes, he gets tight. He puckers up.
Catch, please don't do that.
His sphincter gets tight.
Please don't do that, Catch.
Hey Trish, Tony's there for you. He's there for you. Therapy session.
Lots of therapy sessions.
He'll look
Lots
great
of
in the regular
therapy
season.
sessions.
He'll look great at the 1:00 games.
Yeah, don't play and he'll probably end up playing the Vikings in a primetime game because they play the Vikings. Vikings got to play the Texans and Falcons this year, both at home.
Right.
But yeah, I would bet that Falcons game is going to be primetime.
So the Vikings forced 4 interceptions and recovered 2 fumbles in the second half while forcing Dallas 152 yards total in the game. Of course, then again, they didn't have Calvin Hill or Bob Billy. So
their only touchdown was a punt return by Golden Richards.
It happened in the fourth quarter too, I believe.
Yep. Yeah, Golden Richards, who just recently passed away.
Yeah, both teams only combined for a total of 163 yards. Tarkenton was 10 of 21 for 103 yards and a touchdown and 1 interception. No, he rushed for 16. Stahlback had his worst postseason performance of his career. 10 of 21 for 89 yards and throwing 4 interceptions.
How many times was he sacked?
Go to the other sites. I'm going back and forth between sites here.
Okay.
Because one has all that information, the other one doesn't. He was sacked 3 times for 26 yards.
Jim Marshall had 2 of them. One was a strip sack that Gary Larson recovered.
Tarkenton 4 for 30. Yeah, Tarkenton had the better game. Neither one of them had a good sporting game, but Roger Stahlback's QB rating was 19.8.
That was a bad game. That was a bad game for Stahlback.
Yeah, and Newhouse had 50 yards rushing.
Yeah,
that's it. Nobody else was in double. Was even close to that. Even receiving, the most receiving yards was 20 yards.
Yeah, that's right. There was that stretch, Davey, where both teams turned over the ball. I watched.
Yeah, Vikings had 4 turnovers and Dallas had 6.
Yep. Bobby Bryant had one for return for a touchdown interception.
So defense, Bobby Bryant had 2 interceptions for 63 yards and a touchdown.
Seaman had an interception too.
Seaman had an interception. Jeff Wright had an interception. Hillenberger. Hildenberg, sorry. I don't know why. I always say Hillenberger. So it does say, okay, so Hillenberger had a sack.
Yeah.
Larson had a sack. Marshall had a sack.
Okay. And they got the sacks listed?
For some reason, for the playoff games, they have them listed.
Oh, for God's sakes.
And then Larson had 2 fumble recoveries, and Tarkenton had a fumble recovery.
The Cowboys had the ball down to the goal line, and they were driving.
Yeah.
And they fumbled, and Gary Larson got the other fumble. Yeah, he had 2 fumble recoveries that game.
Yeah. So the kick punt returns was 1 for 63 yards and a touchdown for Golden Richards.
Golden Richards, yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. 1 field goal. Fred Cox had 3 field goals. I'm so sorry, 2 field goals, 3 extra points.
Oh, and in case anybody's wondering who our special teams coordinator was back then, it was Bud. Bud Grant was our special teams coach. And we had at that time for 3 years, we had Mike Eichheit as a punter, and he was, to me, terrible. He was terrible. And then I think he retired, but he was not a good punter.
Yeah. All. And then we all know the next game. We won't talk about that because he already did.
We already covered it. Yeah, that was if for what the Dallas game was a great team effort, the Super Bowl was not that game. Yeah, I did know that. Page was playing with a bad ankle. Yeah, and it bothered him in the Super Bowl too.
Anytime we can beat the Cowboys is a good day.
Oh yeah. Well, and that kind of started because the Cowboys were arrogant enough that they said they were all set to go to the Super Bowl, and then they didn't win. They were salty. They were salty. And what's his name was on the rules committee, so he used to try to stick it to Bud any chance he got. Stram.
Right. Tom Landry was the coach of the Cowboys.
Landry, I think Landry was on the rules committee
Yeah.
too. Landry was on it. Shula was on it. So and they would get on Bud. They got on Bud's bad side early.
Yeah, so that was another season that ended in disappointment.
Yeah, it's for what it was from August until December. When it got to January, and then the Super Bowl. The football season was done by the middle of January. I think we played that Super Bowl on January 13th of 74.
Let's see. The Dallas game was December 30th.
Right.
So let me see.
And the Super Bowl was 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks later.
January 13th.
January 13th. So season was over, and then you had the Pro Bowl afterwards, which nobody cared about. So then you had no football. Now when the football season ends basically on President's Day, and you've got the free agent, like with the free agency and the draft and all that other stuff. Now you've got 24-hour NFL coverage. It's
kids today don't. I remember when I was a kid. I'm not as old as you are, Tony, but getting the paper and reading Monday's edition. Mm-hmm. That was during football season. The Sunday edition, yeah, that was great because it had all the teams and had the previews. But the Monday edition was just as big for me because they had all the game results and all the stats and everything like that. So not being able to watch my team because like I said, not because it wasn't my local team.
Yeah,
I could. That was awesome for me to get the paper. And the Palm Beach Post, where I grew up, they, even though it was a quote unquote a Dolphins paper, they did an excellent job of putting all 30 teams, all 28 teams.
They had a Dolphins report, didn't they? Like a Dolphins weekly.
They had a whole section on Sunday they had a whole section on Sunday on the sports page, 2 pages of the Dolphins game coming up, talk, opponents and stuff like that. But on the next page, they had all the other games and they had the matchups and like who they thought was going to win that game. So it was pretty. And they had the color helmets of each.
Oh, okay, team. Yeah.
So it was awesome. Palm Beach Post did a fantastic job of covering the NFL.
And see, if you didn't, because like we used to have a bookstore here in the Twin Cities called Schindler's. That's where they sold Pro Football Weekly. So I would always get my dad to drive me down to Schindler's so I could get the newest Pro Football Weekly or the newest Vikings report. Bob Lertzma had it. Was Carl Kaselke's first, then Bob Lertzma had it, then Tommy Kramer had it. So I would get those. Yeah, that was my only. Yeah, that's how I got football news. Unless you got it, since we didn't have computers, we did, but not like we do now. You either got the Wednesday edition with the stats in it, NFL stats, or you just like added up on your own like I did. I was a geek, okay? I'm sorry. Yeah. I was a geek. But yeah, I mean, and then for previews, like you had your Sunday paper, which it was a small write-up. They got better as time went by.
Yeah.
But at the time it was just a small write-up and then who's playing who. But yeah, if it wasn't for Pro Football Weekly and Viking Report, I mean, I'd have went crazy.
They did the same thing they did the same thing with college football too.
Yeah.
Because Florida State, Miami, they did the same thing. They had the season preview and they had all the helmets of the teams that they were playing, and all the helmets were in color and all that. And I used to cut them out, the helmets of the team, and then I would put them on the table or put them on the floor, and then I would have like mini games. I had to take a deck of cards, right? And then I put one helmet here, and then I have a deck of cards, and then I would flip the cards over. So whoever had the highest card, quote unquote, won that game.
Oh, jeez.
So I did like a simulation season.
Right.
I mean, this is before computers, man. You had to be creative when
You
you're.
had to be creative. You had to
Yeah,
be inventive.
yeah.
You just had to.
And then I would do the same thing with like the football cards and the baseball cards. I would take a
Mhm.
team and do them like that, and I'd be like, okay, so this is a win, this is a win, this is, and then there'd be championship game, and I did like a mini trophy ceremony. It was great.
Yes, I used to get the old NFL board games they used to have. One I had was NFL Strategy. Me and my buddy used to play that all the time. And
And yes, and I would always get mad because I never got a goddamn Viking helmet.
you know what? I
I'd
got
get
them out
like
of the
10
gumball
Packer
machine.
helmets.
I got them out of the gumball machine. And the ones I used to get all the time, believe it or not, was the friggin' Bears. I used to get the
Yeah.
Bears all the time. But yeah, I remember getting those.
And then they switched to the glass beer mugs.
Mm-hmm.
So I never got Minnesota. I always got every team but Minnesota.
You know what, Davey? Those books, I've seen them advertised on YouTube. People are selling them. I didn't get it. I forget what gas station it was that had it. But yeah, I remember which ones you're talking about.
Yeah, I used I see. I wouldn't be surprised if my mom still has them, because even when I was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
they would have each team, and then they would have 8 to 9 players, and then you would go to the store, you'd buy a pack of stickers.
Tops
And
used
then,
to do that.
yeah,
I've got the books. I ain't got
yeah,
the stickers. I never filled up any of the
yeah.
team. Well, some of the teams, but yeah, it's Tops did that. But the book that Davey's talking about, it was like the whole damn team. It was like
It was all. Oh, okay.
it was like 12 or 13 stickers for each team, which was kind of cool because you kind of got to know who was who, and they kind of did more in depth than Tops did. Tops only put out the cards of the most popular players.
I have a lot of Viking stuff that when we finally get our house, I'm gonna set up my YouTube room or my home office. I'm gonna put all my Viking stuff that I have. I have a lot of Viking stuff you guys don't see that eventually.
I still got Viking posters that I got to get framed.
Oh, so I got John Randall standing in front of like a brick wall.
Yeah, I had Brick House. Yeah, I had that one.
And then I got Moss posters. I got a bunch of posters. I
got the one Viking poster where the Viking actually looks stoned. I got that one, which I got to put up. That was done in the 60s, but I've also got posters from the 80s, other NFL posters too, of all the teams that I got to put up. But
I got a poster back when before they went corporate with the stupid ass NFL logo. Back when the NFL logos actually meant something.
mm-hmm.
I have a poster of all the NFL logos from like Super Bowl 1 to I think it was Super Bowl 26, 27, or might be more than that. I'm not sure where it ends. But before now, when it's just the same numbers, it has maybe color tint in the numbers. Each Super Bowl had its own logo.
Yeah.
So
now it's just a template because they're too lazy to come up with anything original.
Yeah.
They do that, and it's the same thing with the team posters now, where they used to do like George Bartel did the artwork in the 70s.
Yeah.
And he would do like individual teams and different styles and stuff like that. Now it's just that whole like generic type of thing. Like if you look at the Viking poster behind me, if you can see it, there's a bunch of the NFL did a bunch of posters like that for every team. Yeah. There was no like nothing individual for that team or nothing. They just basically slap the logo on there and the team logo and sell it and people buy it.
I don't think I've ever heard of that.
I did hear that. I never saw them. I've heard of them.
Yeah. See, my mom probably still has a lot of my Viking stuff. So
that's good.
He's got more space than I do. So
I lost all my cards. I had other books and all that when my parents died.
I want to thank my mom. My mom realized the importance of that stuff. She never threw any of that stuff away.
My mom hung on to it. It was my sister that threw it out. I didn't go. I didn't go through the house when my parents died. They went
Yeah.
through the house and they threw it all out.
My
So
my mom got me these. I think they were from the Franklin Mint.
mhm.
They were baseball cards, but they were ceramic baseball cards. Each one of them was hand painted of like a Hall of Famer, and it had the picture of it, and then on the back it had all their stats.
Yeah.
But our house got broken into, and that was one of the things that got taken.
Mhm.
But that was awesome. That's one thing I do appreciate. You hear stories all the time. Oh, my mom did this with my sports memorabilia. My mom did that. My mom never sold any any of
Yeah.
my stuff. She never
My
got
mom
rid of
never
any of
did
my stuff.
either, but it was other family
Yeah,
members. That was the problem.
I
So
used to save newspapers because one day I'm like, oh, people aren't. I'm gonna need to see. I'm gonna save all these
it was, you
newspapers.
know what? My mom saved the whole 98 season. Because I was living in Minneapolis. She would get the St. Paul paper and save the St. Paul paper for me. I would buy the Minneapolis, but she would save the St. Paul
Yeah,
paper.
I still got Viking updates, the magazine.
I had
In my
mine. I had a
Yeah,
bunch of them. I don't
I
have them anymore.
they eventually switched to the mag. It was great when it was a newspaper form, and I think when was it Matthew Collier took it over
It
after Bob Litzmer. Somebody like that took over the Viking update after
and it
Litzmer
turned into a
sold it.
magazine. That
It
was
turned into a
it
magazine,
was
and it
still Lertzema,
right,
but what's his name was running it, and they went into magazine format.
yeah, and it went downhill
And
once it went to magazine
yeah,
format.
but then like I talked to Bob about that. He said he got out just in time because everything was going over to digital.
Yeah,
So
and
he
the
said
Viking
he got
update
out
is.
just in time.
I think Viking. I think it's completely dead now because like the
Mhm.
YouTube channel hasn't had
It's
a
gone.
post in like 7 years.
Well, you know what else is gone? Pro Football Weekly. They don't even have their own
The
website
magazine
anymore.
anymore. Yeah, they
You
have
know?
the show that they do the picks on, but that's
Yeah,
it.
that's it.
That's it.
They don't have, and I'll tell you what, that was best because
I have a newspaper from when Babe Ruth died. I got that at the Baseball Hall of Fame.
oh you know it's funny on that weekend JFK was shot on Friday. That weekend everything was postponed except the NFL. And that Sunday morning was the morning that Oswald got killed. And that afternoon, the Vikings played the Lions at Met Stadium.
Some
That
people
was
ask where I was when JFK was shot. I wasn't even here.
I wasn't even thought of. I wasn't even thought of. I was when Bobby Kennedy was killed. I was one and a half, I believe.
Still not here.
I was one and a half. Same with Dr. King.
But if you guys want to watch it, I think it's on National Geographic. I think it might have been. They have 3 days. Um, I can't remember the name of the title of it, but it's about JFK. It's
Oh,
like
the 3 days of that, the whole
3 days of something. It's very,
yeah.
very, very informative. Like, well, I let my mom know about it,
Mhm.
and she watched it all at one time. My mom doesn't binge watch
Right.
nothing, but she binge watched that. And she's like, "Oh, I remember like it was yesterday," and
Mhm.
stuff like that. But
No, Davey, that wasn't the game with the uniform mix-ups. That was that might have been 64 or 65. Yeah, that was 60.
yeah,
Yeah, that was 66. That was the year I was born. Um, I used to keep depending on the newspapers too, depending on I had the
well,
space shuttle when it blew up. I
you know
had
those those wardrobe boxes like when you move.
yeah,
That's the size boxes I had full of newspapers.
yeah, I just and then now this is how I get a lot of the info that I got on Viking stuff. I would like literally, and this is how much of a geek I was. I would skip school. Okay. Hated school, just putting it out there. Um, and I would go to the library and I would read old newspapers that they had on microfilm. That's how I read articles on the Vikings and stuff like that. That's, um, and kind of other world stuff. But yeah, that's what I would do. You know,
There's great books you can find on Vikings.
I probably own them.
Like I showed one the last time a couple weeks ago. I think Bob Sins is here or something.
Sansevier, Bob
Uh,
Sansevier.
he wrote one. I have like 4 or 5 of them.
What about
Not living in Minnesota, it's hard to get them actually. So, but yeah, there's a lot of them I have, and that's a lot how I learned. You know, plus watching, like I said, the 80s, 90s, 80 like from 80s like 88 um to present. I forget some stuff, some easy stuff. Like I was on a quiz show,
Mhm.
another YouTube channel. They did a quiz show. They're like, give us second round picks. Give us Vikings second round picks from like 2000 to whatever. Well, that's the type of stuff. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, I got one right. I got Dalvin Cook, but it was like that's like something that's I guess I don't want to say it's not important, but it's not like I'm more about games and players than like when they were drafted. You know,
For me, and people are amazed by my memory. I guess is still good, but like I'll just know something off the top of my head, and I'll be like, I don't even believe I answered that question because
yeah,
it's I don't pay attention at the time, but for some reason, if it comes up, I remember it. It's just weird, you know. Like with the '73 season, I remember because
yeah.
big part of my childhood. Um, but like just obscure stuff like music and shit like that, and especially rock music. It's
Circus Magazine.
God, I used to buy that and Hit Parader.
Yeah, that's Circus Magazine with the then I can't remember the name of it, but it came with a free demo with like 12 or 13 songs on it from like new and up and coming artists.
Yeah, that was Hit Parader.
Yeah, so it was yeah.
Then I would get Kerrang. I had to go to like a record store that would because that's
Yeah.
the only place I could find the thrash I was looking for, the thrash bands. And they had Kerrang magazine, so I would start buying Kerrang, and then I started buying Rip. But I got sick of Circus because it was nothing but freaking.
It turned into hair metal.
It was, and
And
I
hair
didn't.
metal, I don't know why they call hair metal metal. It is not metal. Poison is not metal.
It's glam metal. It's
It's not
the
metal.
metal. It's glam for me. If I'm thinking metal, I'm thinking like even like Twisted Sister, Judas Priest, Iron
Yeah,
Maiden,
but
and then you got your thrash, and
it's not metal.
you've got so many categories of metal. It's not even funny.
But it's not metal.
It was metal in the '80s.
It's hard rock. It's not metal.
It was metal in the '80s.
Uh, I,
Put it this
I
way: Dokken was metal. I actually like Dokken, but they were metal. Cinderella was metal. Bon Jovi was metal. Now they're hard rock, but they were metal back in the '80s.
well, yeah, I guess even Striper was considered metal.
Oh God, Striper.
They
Oh,
played them on Headbangers Ball, so I guess they're metal. A
no,
Christian band playing on Headbangers Ball. That's something you got to see.
oh yeah, they were on Headbangers Ball.
That was always
Yeah,
my argument with those religious people. Ah, you listen to that devil music. By the way, this is a Christian band.
they got heat for that. They
Yeah.
got a lot of heat for that.
Yeah, they have a song called Calling on You, and they're talking about calling on Jesus. So maybe you need to slow down on the devil music.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I kind of. They made them. They had them. I don't know what made them do this as a tour. They had them tour with Wasp. So between them yelling to hell with the devil and Blackie Lawless singing "Fuck Like a Beast," I mean, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like what
Wasp was a weird group.
I liked them.
Yeah.
I liked them. Matter of fact, the first time I ever saw Metallica, they opened up for Wasp and Armored Saint at First Avenue. Metallica was late, and they had a big fight backstage. But yeah, that's the first time I saw Metallica, the real Metallica, when they were a thrash band. Not what you get now.
Well, see, a lot of people wear Metallica shirts, but they don't know anything about Metallica before the Black album.
Unless you're wearing a Ride the Lightning album, I'm not talking to you.
Well, they don't know anything but they don't know anything about. By the way, the original album the original album name Kill 'Em All
Metal up your ass.
Was Metal Up Your Ass. For some reason, Metal Up Your Ass is offensive, but Kill 'Em All is not.
Well, you know what's funny? Metal Up Your Ass ended up being their best-selling shirt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody had that one. The only way they could sell it was on a shirt.
Yeah.
Well, just
So
like, Wasp, their
Well,
first
my favorite group is Megadeth. And Dave Mustaine.
on their history with Dave Mustaine.
Dave Mustaine was the original lead guitarist
Yeah.
from Metallica. He was in the band before Kirk Hammett was.
He took over for Kirk took over for him.
Yeah.
Which is funny. They got rid of Dave because he partied too much, but here's the thing, they were partying with him.
Yeah. Well, he was a mean drunk and they were all happy drunks. So that
Right.
But it's like, if you like the really good stuff, the really good Metallica stuff, Dave Mustaine wrote.
Yeah.
Trapped Under Ice, Ride the Lightning, Kill 'Em All, The Four Horsemen. Dave Mustaine wrote most of that stuff.
Which Four Horsemen is my favorite song, by the way.
Right. And then for Metallica, it's Mechanics. It's fast. The tempo, the beat is faster on the Metallica Mechanics than it is on the Four Horsemen.
Yeah, Cliff Burton was to me was ahead of his time.
Yeah.
He was ahead of his time.
And that's why, like, if you listen to Megadeth, I don't know who in here does, Dave Mustaine is not a singer. He was never the singer in Metallica. James was always the singer. Dave Mustaine and Dave Elfman, when they first got together, Dave's like, who's going to sing? Dave Elfman's like, I'm not a singer. And then Dave Elfman is like, you know what? This is your band, so why don't you sing?
He's from Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's from Minnesota.
So I'm surprised. We're still at 22. We're still at 22 viewers. We didn't lose too many talking about metal. So that's good. Metal is. I love metal. It's my favorite music. I will listen to other stuff. I appreciate some other stuff. I listen to 90s rap. The new rap today is awful.
I call it mumble rap.
Yeah.
I call it mumble. Davey, I did hear that. I did hear about that exchange.
Oh, since we're talking about, did you see the trade scenario that the Wobcast, Mike Wobbleshaw, put out on his show?
No, what did he say?
He said trade the Vikings first this year.
Mm-hmm.
So the first pick, pick 11, pick 48, pick 108, and then a first and second next year, and Cameron Bynum for the first pick. And they're like, would you do that? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? Fucking
wait a minute, who are you trading with?
Chicago for the first pick.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I'm like, what the fuck are you guys talking about?
Okay, first of all, what the hell? Why are you helping the division team?
After the first pick, they would not have a pick until the 5th round, and then they wouldn't have a pick until the 3rd round the next year for a quarterback
this year.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Wu-Tang, Method Man is my all-time favorite rapper. So like Wu-Tang, Tupac, that type of Cypress Hill, that type of stuff. I don't listen to anything nowadays. Music today, the rap music today, it's awful. It sucks.
Music today sucks in general.
Yeah. Except for metal. The traditional metal is still the same today.
It's actually coming back. We got away from that whole Limp Bizkit bullshit.
Yeah.
And Korn.
Yeah. Rap metal stuff. Yeah. But yeah, so I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? No way. That's way too much. Dude, give it to a divisional opponent, and no way.
Yeah, you don't. First of all, you shouldn't be trading with a division opponent in the first place.
And then they said if that doesn't work, give them this year's first. So you would go from 1 to 11. Give them next year's first, and Justin Jefferson. I'm like, what the fuck are you guys doing? That's still too much.
Still too much.
Yeah,
who was that? Wobshaw?
That was Mike Wobshaw and the guy he does this host with. Yeah, I still like Wobshaw. I don't think he should have been fired. He didn't do anything wrong. He just had a difference of opinion. I don't think
he got this is what happened. He got political.
Yeah, I don't think you should get fired for different political abuse. But
Well, gee, I don't know, Catch. I got political, and folks stopped listening to me on here.
I myself, I don't care if you disagree with me politically. That's your political thoughts. I don't care. But
I
for
don't care either. I
some
just
people
made a
nowadays,
comment,
like, some people
and
like,
somebody got in their feelings and was like, "I'm out." I'm like, "See you later."
yeah,
You know.
it's like I was asked in a job interview, like, what's the like what's your leanings and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, if you're talking politically, I'm not going to answer that question because it's none of your business. You know, me
Yeah.
having a job shouldn't matter what my political views are. You know, but,
Yeah, that's the whole
yeah,
thing. We might have to give up. We're gonna have to talk about this on Friday too. We are having a show on Friday.
yeah.
So
So anybody who's watching right now,
mhm,
Davey, Bob, that's who's watching in the YouTube. We have
mhm.
22 viewers, only 4 on YouTube. Everybody else is on Twitter
Okay.
or on X. So anybody who's listening on X, as long as it's open forum. I don't have control over Yogi's YouTube, so I can't send an invite out on Yogi's YouTube, but I can send one out on on Yogi's X. Um, but I can send it out on YouTube. So if you can watch on YouTube, you get an invite for the room because it's an open invite; anybody can join.
Right.
So Friday night is open discussion. We will hit on Vikings first. We do the usual first 15 minutes, first 15
Yeah, and then we
minutes.
spend the next 4 hours talking about everything under the sun.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's pretty much Friday night. It's every other
Yeah.
week. Because you only talk about Vikings so much. Or so,
Mhm.
so
It gets old after a while.
we'll talk about the signings and all the stuff the
Yeah.
Vikings did. We'll do that
I'm gonna
Friday.
be honest with you, and I'm probably gonna leave on this note. I might be ready to think about trading JJ.
Well,
We'll talk about it on Friday, but I'm kind of like, I mean, if he's gonna start his little diva thing, I mean, screw him.
I don't know how true that is though, because right now there's a rumor that the Vikings are trading him, and the Bengals are like, oh, JJ and Jamar Chase and
They
Burrow
want
back
to
together.
they want to put the band back together.
But Quasey says he's not trading. So
If Quasey's saying it, then the ones telling him not to trade are the Wilfs.
So I don't think they can trade Justin Jefferson after getting rid of Cousins.
Why can't you?
As much as we don't like Cousins because of who they're going to come and watch. They're not going to come. They're going to watch Sam Darnold throw to Addison. That ain't going to happen.
Here's the thing. It ain't like, guess what? You can't build a team around a wide receiver.
Well, no, but they don't have. They have more than that. They have a running back now, but is KOC going to run? I don't know. But they're building.
I think he has no choice.
They're building the defense. So this is the team Zimmer wanted.
Yeah, well, Zimmer got screwed at the end.
I do, but I'm saying this is the team Zimmer wanted. Run first on offense, great defense. But no, Spielman had to sign Cousins and turn it into an throwing team.
Yeah, oh god.
Anyway, this is Vikings vintage. So.
And on that note, everybody.
So we will I will put a thumbnail out like I always do midday on Wednesday because Tony and I don't usually get together until I shoot Tony a message like around.
You shoot me a message. What do you want to talk about today? Right. And I'm like, oh, I don't know.
Sometimes I say, hey, like last week I said, hey, let's talk about the 69 season. So I said, Tony, what do you want to talk about today? He goes, well, I have some ideas about the 73 season. So we did the 73 season. Mm-hmm. Next week's show, we don't know we don't know yet. So we'll figure that out. We'll let you guys know. We appreciate you guys being here as usual. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe. Even if you guys aren't watching on my channel is TYA Catch 84. Please hit it. Please do subscribe because all these channels are growing except for mine. So I appreciate you guys. Give me a sub. Give me a like. So
thanks again, guys. Thanks again for the support, guys.
Yeah, we really appreciate. Like I said, you don't have. We're just a bunch of guys talking football. You don't have. There's a lot of Vikings content out there, but we are the only ones who do the history every week. So we may take you know, we plan on doing this every week, but we may take, during the hot like July, like the 4th of July weekend or stuff like that. We may take weekend, we may take a week off, whatever, because Vikings have a lot of history. There is a lot to talk about, but we don't want to, blow everything in, you know,
Right.
a
Right.
year and a
I mean,
half. So
there's
we may
tons.
take holidays off. I did this show. I did this show once having COVID. If I get that again, I ain't doing. I ain't doing another show that when I have COVID, or if I'm not sick. So, but we're trying to grow this show. That's why.
Yep.
That's why we're doing it. So we appreciate everybody being here. If you guys have any ideas about about Vikings history, hit me on X, which is Twitter, which is Catch84 on Twitter. I have a picture of my dog Pepsi on there. Or Tony has a Facebook page, 24/7 Vikings, I think it's called.
Minnesota Vikings 24/7 360. I got a few. One is Minnesota Vikings 24/7 365. The other one is NFL and pro football 24/7 365. And I also have classic NFL and pro football 24/7 365. And for those that aren't sports fans, I have hard rock and heavy metal 24/7 365.
I am part of those groups, but Tony will tell you I don't go on Facebook.
No. No.
So it's more because I'm in IT. I barely go on X. I'm only on X for this station mostly. I don't do Facebook. I don't do any of those. Like, I don't do TikTok. I don't do.
Hey, check it out. We got a suggestion from Sarah. Yeah, we could do that. Since the free agency started.
I know we did do a free agent show,
right?
But we didn't do this exact topic for a free agent.
No. As far as free agents go, because we signed a couple of guys in free agent that were free agents that are Hall of Famers.
Are we talking undrafted free agents, or are we talking like they played for another team and they signed as a free agent?
We could cover. No, Bob, we're not doing the Herschel Walker trade. We are not reliving that nightmare. No, no, no.
Well, that could be wrapped into a whole show. The Vikings' best and worst trades of all time.
I don't want to talk about Herschel Walker.
Gotta have to.
Why?
Because it's Vikings history.
I don't care. I lived it. I don't want to talk about it.
People like Zoe didn't.
That's their fault. Read a book.
We're gonna have to talk about
You want me to sit up here and relive it?
I'll put the parental advisory.
Okay, you know what? If I end up in therapy, it's all your fault.
We traded all those picks for a guy who didn't even fit the system.
God.
That's the biggest takeaway. He didn't fit the system.
Yeah. Basically, the Herschel Walker trade. We gave up a bunch of guys and draft choices.
And the Cowboys all the guys we gave them.
Yeah. And the Cowboys went to the Super Bowl and
3 times.
Yeah, and we barely made the playoffs. But yeah, the free agent one.
So the free agent one will be a good one. Herschel Walker trade.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Bob. I remember that.
No, we'll do the free agent show since free agents are relevant.
Yeah, we'll definitely do the free agent show. Is Herschel Walker worse or Deshaun Watson?
We definitely will do a trade show. Vikings worst trades. The Herschel Walker trade is probably the worst trade.
I think Herschel because Minnesota gave up the farm.
Right, and the Cowboys got 3 Super Bowls out of it.
Yeah, the Browns haven't got anything out of it. And it's going to hurt them money.
And the Texans haven't won the Super Bowl because of
So Vikings.
The Vikings Herschel Walker trade, in my opinion, is the worst trade in any sport of all time.
Yeah.
So we'll do that free agent show next week, and then we'll probably do the worst trades in Vikings history. Then we can do best trades in Vikings history. So we can do that.
We still got 2 more Super Bowl teams to talk about.
Yep.
Well, we've got a ton, and we've got years to talk about where.
We also have to do the bad seasons. We could talk individual bad seasons as well. I mean, we got 76 seasons, right? We got 58 seasons for it. Was it
Yeah, we got what 60 some odd seasons.
61 to 2001 was 40 years. So yeah. So
Yeah, we got damn near
2011
we
to
got 60
50
some odd years.
Yeah, 60 some odd years. Yeah.
So worse than Ricky. No. I don't think anything's worse than
Ricky Williams. No, I say it was worse than Ricky Williams because at least Ricky Williams produced. Herschel Walker did nothing.
True. That's true. Yeah, you got to think of it like
I was excited, like because I was at school and I heard, and I was like, "Well, who got Herschel Walker?" Because I knew he was traded. And they go, "Oh, the Vikings did." I'm like, "Yes." And then I got home, I saw the trade details. I'm like, "No."
Well, we gave up so much, but then he comes out against Green Bay, plays his looks
loses
good,
his shoe,
loses his shoe. It was like a storybook beginning,
right.
And it was all downhill after that. It was literally all downhill. Yeah. But yes, okay, Bob, we'll talk about it. But if I need therapy, you're both paying for it. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, we appreciate you guys being here as usual. Can't do this show without you, so we do.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, especially listening to me ramble about Vikings history.
Yeah. And when we talked about metal, we didn't lose any viewers. So
yeah, and we might be doing a wrestling show.
Yeah, my brother-in-law already said that he would do the wrestling show. I just got to let him know what day and time.
Okay, so we'll cover pro wrestling. I was watching pro wrestling tonight, so but yeah, thank you everybody for viewing. Gives me a chance to get out there, and I thank y'all for listening to me ramble on about Viking history because nobody gives a damn.
Yeah,
it keeps my brain working, put it that way.
Yeah, and it's like I said, we're the only ones who do it every week. So, but like I said, we appreciate you guys joining us as usual, and we will see you Friday.
See you Friday.
Vikings, let's win this game. Score Vikings on the relay. Go get that first down, then get a touchdown. Rock 'em, sock 'em, fight, 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 fight. Go Vikings, run out the score. You hear us yell for more.